Hey everyone, and welcome to the Weekly Marketer Podcast. Every single week, we interview deep dive experts in one of the many fields of marketing to drop huge knowledge bombs from the best of the best and teach you how to take your marketing skills to the next level. This is episode 21, and I'm sitting with Josh Krakauer, who runs a B2B social marketing agency called Sculpt, based out of Iowa City. Some of the projects they've worked on are helping launch the New York Times best-selling book, The Third Wave, for billionaire Steve Case. Josh was a regional 40 under 40 when he was 25 years old. His agency was recognized as one of the coolest places to work in Iowa. Their client list includes Fortune 500 companies such as Pearson and Ecolab. Josh, thanks so much for being here with us.
It is so good to talk to you, Jeremy.
It has been a minute. We know each other from back in the day. Gosh, what is it? 7-8 years since I left Iowa City, something like that. So it's been a little while.
The real question is, I always like to ask, one of my icebreaker type questions is to ask people, if they were to go like past page 10 in the search results, what would you pull up about yourself? And I feel like somewhere in there is your crowdfunding venture, because that was right. That was your first startup.
That was my first thing, and it was a horrific failure. But it was my first startup. Yeah, I was trying to do. This was like very early into the days of like even Kickstarter and stuff like that, and I was trying to do a local crowdfunding sort of thing, I guess. We were trying to do like a crowdfunding that was more focused around community and things like that, and it just didn't work at all. But that's okay, because that actually was what I ran my first Facebook ad for. So kind of led me in an interesting direction that I didn't really consider at the time. What would your page 10 result be, out of curiosity? It's kind of a cool icebreaker.
I got into social media marketing by way of the former online community world, which were forums. And I was a big forum guy and a big early YouTube and Google video guy in the car community, in like a really specific make and model. I was really into drag racing, tuning cars, like a really specific older car, these Diamond Star Motors, these DSMs, they're kind of like Evos. And I had my teenage years were full of street racing and drag racing and like way before it was kind of what it is today. But I had forums that I had been founders of and moderators of, and somewhere in there are like super embarrassing YouTube videos of me as a 16-year-old street racing in Chicago with like a backwards hat and grainy footage. And it is absolutely still on the internet. Actually, I think I just checked it recently, and there were like 100,000 views on this YouTube channel which should have been taken down years ago. But the last upload was in 2006. So there you go.
Oh my gosh. Wow. So you early days of YouTube. I love it though. That's great. That's really funny. I'm going to have to actually look up my own page 10 later and see if it's accurate or not. It might be. I don't know.
Luckily, social media at that time was aliases. So you'd have to know what my username was.
Yeah. Like the little X, then the big X, and like hardcore Josh or something like that. Like one of those like straight like AIM handles, That's funny. Well, I really appreciate you being here with us, and I do have to say, you've done such a really incredible job, and you're one of the few people I know that have like not only started an agency, because I know a lot of those people, but you're somebody that started one and then have just been growing it and grinding and really found this awesome niche and grown your team to like, I think you said 10 full-time people, right?
Yeah. We've been, and actually I guess it doesn't sound like a super scaled number, but we've been 10 full-time people plus teams or contractors on top of that for some time, and it's just been like a good size for us.
Well, that's incredible though, because I mean, a lot of people, it's a very boom bust sort of cycle, you know what I mean? And you probably experienced this to some degree early on, or maybe not. I don't know. Maybe that's the secret to scaling.
No, we've been bigger before. We've been bigger before, and you have to right size for you. I mean, maybe we'll be smaller. Who knows in the future? But I think that it is something that you absolutely see.
No, that's incredibly interesting. So we were talking about, kind of right before we hopped on when we write the intro and things like that, we were talking about something really interesting. You know, everybody listening, like most of the people listening, are trying to do an agency or a startup or something like that, right? But they're all trying to grow companies, really. And you were kind of talking about like that experience of growing companies and finding the right size for you, and kind of the difference between like kind of the early days and the later days. What was that like 1 to 2 person moment, and what was that 2 to 5 person moment? You know, how are those experiences different, you know, and how do you kind of start that scaling process, and what are the differences between like the early days and now?
And we live in such a different time, given that I started my agency in 2012, where if I was doing it over again, maybe I wouldn't do it exactly the way I did it. But we also have this unique advantage where we started our company in Iowa City, which, for those that don't know or aren't familiar, it's a college town. And what that enables you to do is have this incredible talent pipeline right at your disposal, as long as you're willing and able to hire students that are really early in their careers. But luckily, no one had that much experience in social media in 2011, 2012. So it was really our early version of growth was, how many interns can we fit in a very small office? And it turns out 7 is the answer. And
not 8. That's the break point.
8 is beyond the scope of what that tiny office could fit, but 7, perfect. And we really did move in a less than methodical way, which was, we really grew at the pace that we could give interns and like part-time team members meaningful work, and grow them into full-time team members once we got enough business to sustain that. And so it's not exactly what I would recommend doing today. I think I would be more focused on what is our ideal profit margin, how big do we want to be, and grow with a little bit more intentional thought. But at the time, you know, we really actually quickly surpassed the 1 to 2 mark, because I will say that there was a time period where I had co-founders, and maybe that kind of got us past that mark, but they quickly exited the business and I was on my own. And now they work in big brand agencies today, and are kind of doing that world. And I decided, like, let's tackle local social, because in 2012, 2013, when we were getting going and we're a year or 2 in the business, it was still early enough where companies were mystified by how to grow their business using these channels. And in a college town where every single customer that they'd want to reach are active on Twitter and Facebook, and starting to experiment with Instagram, like this is almost pre-Instagram rolling out beyond iPhone, like there really was a huge need for someone to come in and just do it for them, like an outsourced organic social media service. And so we had a lot of demand. It wasn't so clear what the right metrics were going to be, and it was not something that has the accountability that it does today. But we actually did grow quickly past 2 people up to, you know, about 5 full-time employees within a couple years. And it was largely just from this incredible need, even in a very small community. We're talking like 100,000 people in Iowa City, and then the greater, you know, region that we're in is maybe 500,000 people. There's a lot of demand, and that local business demand really drove a lot of our early efforts just through sheer force. I'll also throw out that the other thing I wouldn't do that also helped us grow, which is why it's a little bit of a vanity metric to see how many employees you have, is I was 20, I don't know what, early 20s. So 22, 23, you don't really you need a livable salary. You need to be ramen profitable. So what I did for the first few years was invest everything into hiring people that had far more experience and far greater needs. And so we had to comp them well. And even though, you know, it wasn't like what the salaries were, what they're like today, you know, I really prioritized investing in the team, having an amazing set of benefits and culture characteristics, the things that would make people stick around, meaningful work opportunities, leadership opportunities early on, at the sacrifice of, you know, maybe me having like a lot of savings or having a sexy lifestyle that I would share on Instagram. Like, it was very much about purely bootstrapping and investing everything into growth. That's something that I will say, if you're willing to do that, you can grow a team pretty quickly.
Well, that's actually interesting, and you hit on something that I've always been, kind of pretty impressed by you about, which is it's very obvious, kind of like with Ogilvy stuff, you can look at it and you can see that it's an Ogilvy, right? Like, especially like the older stuff, right? Like that was like his whole thing. I wanted people to be able to know this was an Ogilvy ad. I would say that like you've done a pretty incredible job of kind of keeping like this really distinct mark and way you all do things. And I have to think that that's a big part of that is, kind of your company culture and things and really that. And so I guess kind of, how would you say that company culture has like affected the actual work that your agency has done, and kind of what's the importance of that culture, and, kind of how have you focused on building that?
Here's how I think about this, because it can be a really intangible thing. It's like, what's the value of your brand, or what is a brand? I mean, it's one of those discussions that you can get really heady and it's hard to follow and really make actionable sense for an audience. And the way that we've looked at it is I recognize that a culture is very much an extension of the founder. I probably didn't recognize that as much. So I learned about myself, as you do through entrepreneurship. You become super self-aware because all of your weaknesses are amplified and your strengths maybe kind of make you who you are. I recognize that I am a detail-oriented person, not like obsessively, but I care about quality tremendously. And that's more so what I mean. So we have invested in designers early in social media, in the world of social media marketing. So like well before Canva was a thing, we've always had designers on staff publishing every single post that goes out for any size brand. Like we have a graphic designer and a video producer that are creating every single asset that we produce. That might, for some people, feel absolutely unnecessary. For us, it's not so much that I think that there's like a one way to do it. It's that I care so much about producing work that is quality, and it's quality in the eyes of the audience, of course, but I have that filter too. So we also in the past, especially put a lot of time into proposals. We put a lot of time into understanding our client's business. We don't have the same exact menu template that they show every single person. And that attention to detail of a client's business and their customers' audience is something that really resonated with certain clients. Like it certainly isn't the right fit for everyone, but that's something I recognize about myself, is that I tend to care about those things. And I'll also say that when I grew enough to begin to articulate this, we now just define our culture by our kind of two core values and our mantra, which is hustle and heart. And it's on our coffee mugs and on posters and on our website. And, it's all over the place if you stepped in our office. And what I love about those two words together, hustle and heart, is that it perfectly describes both the way that I look at the world, which therefore is kind of how we shape our culture, and also therefore how we hire and who we hire for. So hustle and heart values, if you think about those two things, hustle, and this is something I would recommend, like not so much just to building these values, but actually following these. I think it applies to marketing and people's businesses. Hustle is all about your work ethic. For us, we've invested a lot in agile and bringing agile methodologies and adapting and testing and learning. It also represents, your innate need to be a doer and to have a bias towards action. So instead of like waiting for something to happen, just doing it. So that's hustle, which is now kind of unfortunately an overused word, but there you go.
Yeah, unfortunately, I think that's been kind of co-opted by the larger scene in general. But I know you've been using it for a while, though.
Yeah, I'm okay with it only because it is balanced out by heart. So I'm a huge proponent of like having balance in opposites. I like all my favorite creativity exercises are about finding opposites. And so I think that not necessarily that heart is the opposite of hustle, but that it's a good balance, because heart is all about, in our world, connecting with a customer and thinking about the audience and more specifically the human at the other end of the computer. Like, would a human engage with this? Humans really only engage with things on social media if they're funny, useful, beautiful, and inspiring. Like, is this something that someone would have a human connection with? As we build a company, are you caring about the other person? Do you show empathy towards the other person? Are you collaborative? and actually work with another person. In our organization, that matters a ton. Like we actually believe that 1+1 = 3, that you can actually do more if you do it together. So those are the things in our world that we've now been able to finally make sense of. And we would just point back to most of our successes and say that the reason why certain clients hired us over someone else, given that we're in a pretty competitive industry, as most of your audience has found out, is that culture, even if you're a remote team or a team of 2 or 3, how you express your values and how your people show up and then articulate that to your clients, like really has a big bearing on if they're going to do business with you and if you're going to attract the right people. So that means everything for us.
Absolutely. That's really interesting. And I want to kind of go back to something. And like you were talking about finding people that are the right fit, but then also like promoting the culture. Are you finding that it's easier to find somebody that already has the values and hire them and teach them the skills? Find somebody that has the skills, teach them the values? Find somebody that has both? I mean, is culture like that something you can teach, or is it something that somebody has to have inside of them? How do you build and include people in this culture in a way that perpetuates it?
Well, the way that I do it, because I am myself knowing my own weaknesses, is that as much as I wish I could build people up, because I think the right answer that a lot of people would say, if there was a right answer for something, is that you should always hire for the values, like hire for the culture first. Let's say someone that is going to have the same work ethic. Like, by the way, a culture is really just your shared values about the work you do. And so, that matters most, is someone is going to fit in your culture. But personally, I am not amazing at building people up with the skills. I actually value people that have something valuable to bring to the table right away. And that is important for us as a small company. As we get bigger, and let's say that we decide, okay, we're going to go for it, we're going to, triple in the next couple of years, you can't possibly do that. You can't just only hire smart people, because they're a little bit more expensive. They have their own perspectives on what's right and wrong. So you do have to train people up. And of course, we do build people in certain ways, but I'm not good at taking someone with no knowledge and getting them to move forward and become extremely good at consulting, let's say. I actually think that our clients hire us because we already know what we're doing, and people aren't necessarily training on the job, so to speak, not in the way that I think you'd expect if someone was starting from scratch. So I think what I do look for are people that, if they don't know everything, they have one of our cultural values, which is that they are so hungry for growth. They have a growth-oriented mindset, which means that like they on their own find your Reddit subreddit, on their own, they watch your videos. Like, that's what I mean. It's someone that actually cares about this stuff, and that on their own, when they go home, even if they have a life, because we hire people with kids and, that have more than marketing on their mind, they still are interested in this and want to grow, not because they think it's going to make them more valuable alone, but because they're actually driven by that. And that to me is really important. And that is something you can teach. I've hired people that are really experienced, and I learn really quickly, they actually don't want to progress in their career. They don't actually want to collaborate really well with other people. They're actually not really a doer. And that is more detrimental than someone that just doesn't know everything they need to know, because if they have the right values, they'll learn it on their own, or they'll make an effort to do so.
No, I actually really like that. That I think is a lot more honest than a lot of the answers that people would give. And I don't say that as like to imply that it's like a bad thing by any means. I actually think that it's a really good thing, and I think that like the realities of a small team and training and things like that. And then kind of the focus though on people that are resourceful, that can kind of figure it out while embodying the culture, is kind of a really smart and very introspective sort of analysis of the people that you're looking for. So, I mean, shifting gears a little bit, kind of away from like the culture discussion and things like that, and, kind of building this team and building like this, really great small agency, let's talk a little bit kind of about the work and like, how did you land on B2B social? Cause that's kind of an interesting space. I don't think a lot of people think of social, like, we were talking a little earlier, social is really obvious for e-commerce, for retail, for restaurants, things like that, where it's easy to take super beautiful photos and have that content. But B2B is a little bit harder. You kind of want to talk about how you arrived at B2B social?
Yeah, I mean, B2B have bigger budgets, so that's the biggest.
That's it. It's all about the. I forgot the third value. It's hustle, heart, and Benjamins.
This is also one of those honest things that we're smart enough where we advise our clients on things and then we look back at ourselves and say, ooh, yeah, are we following that same practice? And, if you're doing social and digital marketing, one of the first things you're having a discussion with your client or with your team is like, how are we narrowing our audience so that we can build a super specific and valuable path to purchase? How can we actually make someone feel like we're talking right to them and then drive them to an offer that's made for them, that's compelling them to move? You should go narrow to some extent. Obviously, that's a school of thought that you could go the other way on if you're in certain brands. But the things that we're selling, generally, you want to be targeted. You want to know your persona. You want to know your audience. And what we looked at is, like my honesty is that we went through 100 plus clients that we've worked with over the years. And we tried to figure out, what are we good at? Because for a long time, in that same way that the founder sort of ends up shaping the company, I realized we have just been everywhere. Our niche forever has been organic social media content. And then, organic social media content started losing some steam because it needed paid support and amplification to actually be successful. And so then we, really built a paid strategy capability, and we started digging into that, and we, expanded in lots of different ways in the scope of what we can do. And we did it without changing the type of clients we took on. So nonprofits, e-commerce, business to business, enterprise, as long as they were a good fit in, their ability to work with us successfully, we're going to try it. And looking back on it, we realized that B2B companies are a good fit. And again, that's not even like that much of a niche, I'd say, that's still pretty broad, but companies that are selling to other businesses, you make a big difference when you bring them a new customer. The lifetime value of a customer is tremendous and is then much easier to justify investing in new marketing experiments, as well as it's easier to connect the dots sometimes. Maybe not as easy as like, did they add to cart? Did they purchase? Like that, of course, that attribution on e-commerce is often very, very easy. But on marketing, if we can be responsible for driving a lead or tracking down to the customer, and they weren't doing that before, we've now made the difference between their business being in mediocrity forever to now actually having a chance to really grow. So by putting that infrastructure in place for clients, you can make a huge difference, like actually showing them how social can connect to a customer. And that's just something that most people weren't doing. Social tends to either be, direct response or brand awareness. And we were trying to, now show how it can also be a huge business driver for companies that are selling to big businesses. They also tend to be more complex. So they might have lots of different audiences, lots of different parts of their business. They need an expert that can help them make sense of it, even if they've hired someone inside of their company to own social. So that's maybe the other reason that we found it to be really interesting is you don't get replaced in the same way that maybe you do in other areas where it's like, oh, no, we're doing that in-house now. For B2B social, you tend to find that we're actually working with a marketing team or a marketer, sometimes a digital marketer or a social marketer who actually just needs someone else on the outside to help them ramp up this channel. It's just part of that process of everyone finding what they're good at. I think you'll see us in a year probably even message much more narrow than B2B social, but it's just something that we found. It's not obviously the only business we take on, but it's something that we find tremendous opportunity in that I could talk for days about.
I really like that, where it's kind of like you're understanding, where you're able to drive the most value and kind of figured out that process through a lot of different trial and a lot of different experiments and things like that. And it seems too like, would you say that part of it is that because I hear the excitement in your voice when you kind of talk about like the challenges around B2B social, right? And would you say that like just how much you like the work is like a big factor? You know, I've heard people, they explicitly say that the best paying stuff is things that nobody else wants to do, right? Is that a fair characterization, or are you having fun with it? Do you think that brings extra energy? Like, is it like a passion as well as just like something you're good at? You know, could you kind of touch on that a little bit?
It is. And yet what you also find when you have a team is that everyone won't be happy. Like you can almost never make everyone happy. I get excited by so many different things like, oh, cool, this real estate opportunity. Oh, cool, this venture capital firm or an engineering firm or like a weird construction solution. I don't know. Almost anything, if there's a path to helping them grow, can be exciting. I wouldn't say that universally everyone has that. And so I wish it was as simple as that. Like, oh, I just love these clients, so everyone else will. But frankly, like the stuff that my team gets excited by, if you're, a mom and you have kids, like you generally are going to want to work on things that are, brands that sell to other moms. And that isn't my expertise. So I'd say that passion is not necessarily always what's profitable, which is also what you had pointed out as. I do think the unsexiest businesses tend to be the most lucrative because they often are the most valuable and are also the ones that have the most room for creativity. So I would go back to that and say that, while we're sort of talking about the business opportunity with niching down when making that decision, I'd also look at, yeah, of course, like what is exciting to you. And I think that when we have a mantra like hustle and heart, we look at a business to business, like kind of unsexy business model and realize that social, which is really, again, just about connecting with other people, just like back in the day when we did peer-to-peer, internet communities, you see the ability to take a big faceless brand and put a spokesperson in front of them or put a voice, like a playful voice in front of on their channels, or mix up their content strategy and actually show their people or dig in and do something bolder or riskier that really changes the way people think about it, or like really amplify the people inside their company using social media. Those things are really effective. And I do think I get excited by them. Therefore, they become successful.
Okay, I really like that. It's an interesting thing that you kind of touched on there too, which is you kind of said social media is really about connecting with people, right? And I think it's kind of one of those like deceptively like simple phrases, right? In that like, yes, it's obviously a very kind of like simple sort of platitude, right? But it's like there's a lot of truth in there to like kind of unpack. You've been doing social media for quite a while, longer than most, kind of how have you seen it evolve over the years, and where do you see it going?
It's interesting that I wouldn't say back to communities, but I would say there's been this up and down cycle of the value of the word community. Like we used to use the word community management a lot more in our marketing. We used to say, oh, we do online community management, or we do like social media community management. And our account managers, which are now called engagement managers, used to be called community managers. Like there's been kind of a cycle that went with the role of social. Like when I was starting and your brand community maybe was a forum. And now with the sort of rise, like I would say more of the recent renaissance of groups, which obviously you can just watch Facebook's playbook and sort of map that to a lot of social, or at least where they're investing. Like you could see that a lot of where social is going back to is private community or tribe-based social communities. Like that's it. It's going back to people connecting with each other because that's what users want. Like where brands fit in is often a lot harder to say, because you said, what's the future of social media marketing? I don't know. Like a lot of brands don't have a good place in those spaces, like not easily. They are going to really want to target ads against those spaces, but they're not necessarily what people want unless it's done really genuinely. So I say what you're clearly seeing right now and what we're excited by and what I keep watching a lot of is a lot of the channels and a lot of the updates by these platforms are moving people, are sort of following the wave of people wanting to connect with each other again around their really specific interests, I don't think that's ever gone away. So I think if you followed that playbook from the beginning of social and you were doing that on Google Plus circles and you were doing that in LinkedIn groups when those were popular and probably will be popular again, and you were doing that in like GeoCities or wherever it was before that, you probably will still be successful, like becoming an expert, someone that's adding value to a group of people based on your specific knowledge or interests. Like it has a lot of value.
That's really insightful. And, just kind of chiming in, and, you kind of alluded to, but Facebook is talking about really kind of revamping the news feed in order to like prioritize just friends and groups, which is what people really want to kind of spend their time doing. And I think there's actually an interesting, we talked earlier about how everybody had their handle online, right? You kind of have to know what the handle was or is to be able to go back and find some of this stuff. Like Reddit kind of is like a renaissance of that a little bit. And it's all community based, right? And then they're sort of making some moves though, so towards like having friends and being able to follow individual users and things like that. So it's fascinating how kind of like these different companies that came at it from very different places are sort of converging in a weird sort of way. Is that kind of what you see the future being? Is that you touched on, groups and tribes and these different ways of describing interest groups or, like groups around who you are as a person, like demographically or whatever. That's kind of what you see the future. And do you think that looks like Facebook? Do you think that looks like Instagram? Does it look like something totally different that doesn't exist right now? And how do brands fit into that conversation?
I feel like you play the game forever. It's really fun to look at what's the future. I think the brands that tend to win, of course, are the ones that are just relentless about being in the now, of course. And the now tends to become the future really quickly. And by that, I mean, like, you can see things that are already trending upwards, and if you don't capitalize on them, if you don't experiment with them now, then when they are popular, you feel like a laggard. So I don't know what the right answer is. I as an example, like I don't know what value brands can bring, and a lot of times on a platform like Reddit, because the Reddit community would kind of push back unless it like perfectly fit at that time and moment. Obviously there's a play for like the paid Reddit ad campaigns because it's very hyper interest based, but it's not necessarily the space for the organic side of brands yet, unless again you have something interesting or value to add. So I don't know which of, I would certainly bet on Facebook for quite some time because they have more data than anyone. So they're already seeing things, they're already aware of it. And they also shape user behavior so much. It's groups were always a big deal. Now they're a bigger deal because they prioritize them in their newsfeed. And now you're seeing groups more often, and they started showing notifications for them. It's not like those were always on as frequent as they were. As they turned them on, now we say that groups, it's no surprise that groups have 1 billion users. It's not an accident. It's because they made that happen. So I would always bet on Facebook. I'm not anti-Facebook in that way. Like I think it's always a smart play. There's very rarely a strategy where we don't have a client on Facebook. I also believe in these other things, and that the best brands tend to be, or the most successful ones on social media tend to be the ones that are both interested in social media is probably the easiest way to describe it. Like they're people who actually care about connecting with an audience or a customer on a new channel. That tends to be the one. Like there's a genuine interest there of like sharing knowledge somewhere new and then formatting the content or, being a part of the currency in that channel. Like that's probably the best way to describe it, is not trying to do something because it's an early, but because, you can figure it out and how to reach your audience there. Like that's probably the only way to advise someone, look at the future. Otherwise we're all, if we had played this game 3 years ago, we all would have been investing in, heavy, deep, like AR, VR capabilities. Not that that's not now a thing, but that was also the topic of 3 years ago. And like we're just now, in a space where people are actually using those products and features. So I think you got to just watch, be like a a consumer of this stuff. And if you don't like it, you should hire someone that does. Like, that's generally what I advise.
Absolutely. I think that makes a lot of sense. That's really cool. And I don't think that's a bad thing. I do want to kind of chime in. There's so many disciplines in marketing. Like, I absolutely am completely unequipped to do what you do. It's just not what I'm good at all. Kind of everybody has like their own kind of little niche. So it's not necessarily a bad thing to say, hey, like, I really don't like social. I just like writing long form content or whatever. Like, guess what? You can be one of the greatest marketers that ever lived if you just nail long form content, or whatever. So I think it's important for people to kind of not get too pigeonholed into what is the now. You know what I mean? Or would you disagree with that?
No, that's so true. It's one of those areas where like you have to be so careful with that advice. Yeah. Because like you want to be so good at experimenting if your brand relies on earned media and is a social by nature brand. Like, and that, like, this conversation resonated with you. If not, if you're like, look, that's not how we get customers. That's not how people find us. That's not relevant to us. Then, like, you don't need to be on TikTok anytime soon. And, you don't need to play with it. And I really agree, because you just literally cannot be everywhere. And most brands that are either enormous or there's more waste than they ever realize. One of the first things we do when we're doing social audits, or we're making recommendations, when people ask us about things like, what should our channel strategy be on these 5 platforms, we almost always start with, what are the 2 or 3 tops, like, that you should double down on, and then which ones become the secondary or the tertiary channels that you can, like, let go of. Like, you have to stop doing things to be good at other things. And I definitely don't think most people have the capacity to do everything. So that's why I don't do, programmatic radio like you do, and you're so good at that stuff.
I am a man of several talents, maybe. No, what are you talking about? I'm all in on 50 things. So that's why that phrase "all in" exists, so that you can be all in on 50 things. No, that's really insightful, and I like that. And so, kind of, I guess, if you had any takeaways, someone out there is listening, they're saying, hey, I'm starting an agency, or I've been a freelancer and I want to kind of grow, any kind of like early lessons, specific actionable sort of things that you think that they could do, or that you wish you would have done, just like 1 or 2 of those.
I generally start to think about, when we recap like our conversation, and I think back to some of the more meaningful things that you try to reflect on. A lot of it, people in the community right now are definitely talking about self-awareness. Like, I hate to just be like a Gary V stan or whatever, but I think he's really what he represents. I think, and one of the things he stands for about self-awareness, what I would bring to that conversation is that I've more and more recognize that your greatest strength is also your greatest weakness. And so I feel like this just applies to marketing, and applies to your own development. Is there's so much advice from everyone about how to grow an agency, and any one of those systems are going to work if you were to follow it to a T and it resonates with you, I suppose. Like, any of the thinking, you can build a whole remote freelance agency if that is your strength, but if you do, realize you're going to have a huge weakness, which is if you build a full giant remote agency because you're a big process oriented person, and like everyone is a contractor or offshore or something, and you have great margins, you're probably not going to have a culture in the same way. And you're probably not going to have like the same brand reputation. On the flip side, if you have and invest in a team and decide that you're more likely and more to be successful if you are building a team where you can see everyone in person, and you have a space, and you have values, and everyone cares about the same things, then you're going to have the upside of that, but you're also going to have the downside of constantly, dealing with profitability and, other obvious issues with having that kind of overhead. So you just have to understand which path you want to take and what what the consequences are and what the upside is, and be super okay with it and not really compare yourself. But I really think that the hustle and heart like worked for us in terms of describing this, because I think most businesses to be successful really, and most people just need to be thinking about what is their work ethic, their philosophy for work and testing and growth. And then what is like, how do you still preserve the sense of your audience and customer and the people on the other end? And that's certainly been the easiest way for me to explain good marketing to people, is to think about those two elements. And it certainly has helped us apply to our business model.
I haven't explicitly heard that your greatest strength is also your greatest weakness. I've kind of been reading like a lot of books that are talk about like flipping circumstances and changing perspective and things like that, and trying to figure out, kind of embracing those sorts of things and then turning them into strengths, you know what I mean? Which has been interesting. It's kind of a nice, like, it's been something I'm thinking about. And so you said it, which is kind of cool. And I've been joking around that I'm the laziest marketer I know. And I get really annoyed at like redoing tasks and stuff like that. And so what I flipped that into is like being really good at automation.
100%. There you go.
Yeah. So like, and then what would you say that is for you? I guess, so, I use that as my own example. What's your kind of greatest strength and greatest weakness?
I feel like it's a lot. It's a lot of things I think about.
This isn't a job interview.
As an example, that's sort of the hustle and heart thing. Were you even listening, man? No, it's
I was.
It's a total joke. Like adaptability as an example, like because I'm really into agile and like changing things. Like I'm so inclined to pivot, which seems like a bad thing. Yet also I am always staying on top of things. I'm always like ahead, right? But if you're a part of our team, it can feel kind of chaotic. Or similarly, one thing I find that is also very true is being so cognizant of that quality. Maybe you can't move as fast sometimes, or maybe you have to have more under your control. So I've often found that like some of the things that you trade off, you just have to be okay with and sort of find the right balance of those two things. But ideally, like, you are of course amplifying those strengths, and sometimes the best way to find those strengths is to just think about the stuff that you suck at or that you hate doing, as you just did, as you describe your personality. Like if I can get distracted easily, then maybe I'm also always learning, and always able to solve a problem.
No, I like it. Cool. Well, I just want to do one more question. And, I asked for like kind of advice of what people are doing. What do you wish people would stop doing in the social media space? Like, what do you just like, if it went away forever, you would be very, very happy. Like, because I think that is the flip side of the, what should you be doing is as important as what shouldn't you be doing.
And I bang my head on the desk so many times when I see stuff like this, and I know as a digital marketer how well these things work. But I should have brought it up earlier, but a big obvious organic social trend has just been this pivot to personal. Like, your brand used to be this company brand. You would never do Jeremy Consulting Company, or not frequently, because you are more likely to be successful as moonshine marketing, as you are. And what I now see is that, of course, if you are building a personal brand, you really have a much higher likelihood of driving new customers in for like a coaching type business or a consulting type business, and for all sorts of other stuff too, for influencer work, for building an executive brand, whatever. Like, it matters a lot that you have a person out there as a public face of the brand. But what I also see at the same time is just the same script again and again, the same sort of tired philosophy and like playbook of being a growth guru that can change your life. It's kind of there's always a get rich quick thing. And right now it's it's about getting people to stop for 1 second with this selfie kind of style video in some extraordinary lifestyle background, get it like that whole, would you, I don't want to read the script right now, but like you've seen the script, it's all lead into a webinar, a ClickFunnels webinar, and then
yeah, the webinar is $50 and then you get hit with the email for the $1,000 one-on-one.
It's not the business model, because I am fully for that.
Oh, no,
In fact, I fully train people on starting their own agency, and I believe in that, and I believe in that training, and have maybe something to plug about that. But it's the same style of that video. I want that to go away. I want someone else to try something else. I've parodied it before, and it actually got a lot of engagement in some like recruitment ads we've done in the past. It's just, I want that digital side of digital marketing to go away, of feeling like anyone that's watching that, they're either kind of tricked into, playing on the obvious, which is in digital marketing, it's like pretty easy to play on someone's insecurities and fears and self-doubt, and using that to build them up. Like it's effective, of course, but in that same playbook, I want that style video to go away. I just want to urge people to, if they're going to build a personal brand, if they're going to hook people in, to do it with their own authentic self, and to stop trying to all be some reincarnation of Tai Lopez. Like it's probably more that than anything. Being a social media agency, having gone through the wave, it's probably where I'm just venting from, is being a social media marketing agency owner, and then having, a truly successful, pretty impressive person like start a course where anyone for $9.99 can learn how to start a social media marketing agency. You should have seen how many of them like started up in our town, and it's kind of flamed out in a year, and like just flooded people with whiteboard videos. I just want that to go away for a while.
I do remember your whiteboard video for recruiting. It was just you like frantically like drawing on a whiteboard. I actually laughed out loud at that when I saw it.
Exactly. So that's what I want people to stop doing. And I'm sorry for anyone that does it and has a 5 to 10% conversion rate, because I know that it works. I just can't stand it existing on the internet. I just wish that pre-roll went away.
All right. Fair enough. Fair enough. I like it. I like the honesty. So, Josh, thank you so much for being here. Really, I think that you gave an incredible amount of advice about a bunch of different things, from scaling an agency to building a great culture to finding your niche to being, kind of self-aware in like a really positive professional sort of way. I think that if you're listening, this is an incredibly, incredibly valuable perspective, and one that, I can personally vouch for is served him well. Josh is probably one of the more successful people I know, especially in the marketing world. And so we're really lucky to have him. Thank you, Josh, so much again for being here. Before we go, just want to let you take that opportunity to pitch whatever it is that you want right now.
Okay, thank you. And I will add one last thing besides a thank you to you, Jeremy, for hosting me, which is that I just remembered that I would ask every single person that's doing a business where they're growing a personal brand to stop forever stealing viral content and then resharing it on their own to get engagement. That's the thing I really want people to stop doing. That's what I want. And that if they are building an agency and in an early space, I've certainly been there and done that. I don't think I know everything, but I have such a close collaborator and friend that has built an even more tremendous business and lots of other digital marketing spin-offs, e-commerce businesses, affiliate marketing. His agency is also about in the 7-figure range. And we just finally, he lives in Ireland now, and he flew back to film a course with me. And so I'm sort of turning into that course person, but I really want people that are interested in, they're in that range of their business where they just want to get to the $10,000 to $20,000 a month range. Like that would be amazing for them. They're at that level. I have worked really hard to put together like the most honest and genuine, helpful resource for someone to do that. I've watched all the courses. This is one that I think is going to be really useful and is all about doing it a way that if I was doing it over today, I wish I had known this information. And so I don't want to plug our company. You can find us online. I love to just speak one-on-one with people that are trying to build like an agency of their own to something more meaningful. You have to DM me for now because the course is not live. But what you'll do to sort of stay in touch is connect with me, Josh Krakauer, on LinkedIn, or we are Sculpt.com, our website. And so you can be on the first list blast. We're going to have, the whole webinar, early access stuff, but it's a really meaningful, awesome course that will be launching really soon.
Okay, great. Well, I will definitely keep a lookout for it. And when that does come up, I'm going to post it like crazy. So great. Well, thank you again, Josh. Really appreciate the time that you've given us all today. For everybody out there listening, take this advice, run with it. It's incredibly, incredibly valuable. I wish that I could be in a time machine and go back and give myself this advice that Josh has just given all of you for free. So just really kind of internalize it and use it to your advantage. And for everybody out there listening, happy marketing.